Hey folks, this is Riker with a gaming news wrap-up video where we discuss the happenings of the week. This week's topics include EA canning 2 major mobile games, E3 possibly being dead for good, Activision Blizzard having to pay out $35 million, and more. As always, discussion timestamps can be found in the description below, but right before you skip ahead, just a quick reminder to ring that sub notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday episodes and stay up to date with gaming news highlights. But before we move on, a quick word from this video's sponsor, Hi-Rez Studios and Daredrop. Hi-Rez Studios has dared me to complete some challenges for their game Smite on Daredrop. Let's say, win a conquest match. That seems simple enough. Smite is a third-person MOBA in which you play as gods and other mythological beings. You can wield Thor's hammer, you can turn your enemies to stone as Medusa. There's over 100 characters to choose from, many of whom you'll recognize from real-world mythology. I'm a mythos buff, so I love recognizing all these characters and names from various different real-world mythologies. Smite has been out since 2014, and I remember trying it out way back in the day. Since its release, over 35 million people have tried the game, and it's just nice to see how far they've come in all this time. Heck, I remember playing their first game, Global Agenda. I played Tribes Ascend. Now, Smite has just had its biggest update ever with a Magic the Gathering crossover. We got a new god, a new conquest map, a new skin, new battle pass, new in-game mechanics, and more, all included with this update. And it's really easy to jump into Smite. I know MOBAs can be intimidating, but this one's very beginner-friendly. You can practice against bots if you want. There's also options to just auto-level up your skills, auto-buy things until you want to start taking control once you understand what the items do and what the different skills are. Smite is free to play on PS4, PC, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and you can follow the link in the description below to download it off Steam for free. Starting off with some EA news. The company had its quarterly earnings call this week, during which they made a couple of announcements. First, Star Wars Jedi Survivor has been delayed from March 17th to April 28th. And I mean, at that point, you might as well just push it one more week so that it releases on May 4th, aka Star Wars Day. May the 4th be with you. You know, it's right there. Second announcement, they're shutting down Apex Legends Mobile on May 1st, which is just under a full year since its launch on May 17th, 2022. Third, development of Battlefield Mobile has stopped. And fourth, the studio that was developing Battlefield Mobile, Industrial Toioiz, will be shut down. Then, according to Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, the company has also canceled an unannounced game they had in development that was part of the Titanfall/Apex Legends franchise, which was being worked on by Respawn Entertainment. About 50 people were working on the unannounced game, and allegedly EA will try to find positions for them elsewhere within the company, but failing that, they'll be laid off with severance packages. Now, the cancelled game was codenamed Titanfall Legends, and it was going to be a single-player game directed by Mohamed Alavi, who was a veteran Titanfall developer. But then Alavi left the company early this year. Now, did he leave because he knew the game would be canned, or did the game get canned because he left? Maybe one day we'll find out, but in the meantime, Titanfall fans, I'm sure, are left heartbroken. It's been 7 years since Titanfall 2. A lot of fans lost hope, or were maybe holding on to hope for another Titanfall after Apex Legends really took off the way it did, and it seemed that was going to be the future of the franchise. Now, who knows if there will ever be another single-player game in this universe. But let's go back a moment to EA shutting down Apex Legends Mobile and giving up on Battlefield Mobile. We've seen an increasing investment by major publishers into the mobile space in gaming, which has just continued to rise over the years to become one of the most profitable branches in the gaming industry. So to see EA basically tossing out its mobile strategy is interesting, to say the least. During the investors' call, folks were confused and asked, why? Apex Legends Mobile got the Game of the Year award for both the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. And EA CEO Andrew Wilson explained that the game just didn't retain casual players enough to warrant continuing to support the game. He said the game was too complex to be able to translate properly to mobile. Yes, I'm sure that Fortnite, the game in which kids build 15-story mansions in 3/7 of the second through a sequence of precise keystrokes and coordination executed with reflexes that would qualify them for admittance into the US Air Force's Top Gun program, is a game that is not too complex to be successfully translated to mobile devices. Then the third reason he gave is that the mobile market is challenging. Which, hey, yeah, that's fair. Everyone is rushing into this space, the competition is tough. And it's pretty rare to see a new name really emerge in the space and see success. We tend to just see the same games that have been around for years and years continuing to top the charts. It's hard to break in. Wilson went on to say that what they learned through Apex Mobile is what made them decide to can Battlefield Mobile. All that said, though, he did affirm that mobile remains a very important part of their strategy going forward. COO Laura Miel said, quote, "We still perceive the mobile market to be significant. It's $100 billion. It's where Gen Z and Gen Alpha play. It's the platform they prefer. It's the platform they prefer." In other news, Back 4 Blood, the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead that was made by a few of the people who originally worked on Left 4 Dead, will be receiving no further updates. The game released in late 2021 to mixed reviews, then it got 3 expansions since then, and now the devs, Turtle Rock Studios, are moving on to another game project. They explain that their team is just too small to split themselves and keep a team working on Back 4 Blood. Now, this doesn't mean the game servers are shutting down, just there will be no more expansions. My question is, are they working on Back 4 Blood 2, or otherwise what's their next project? In some Activision Blizzard news, that's always a good sign, right? The company will be paying a whopping $35 million penalty to the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is the result of a probe by the SEC to determine whether Activision Blizzard had adequate procedures in place to document employee misconduct. I'm not sure if you folks remember now, from a year or more ago, there was just tons and tons of headlines. But following the whole fiasco about Blizzard's toxic work culture, which subsequently led to everyone hating on Blizzard and a drop in Activision Blizzard stock, there was an accusation put forth that shareholders should have been informed about the employee misconduct, since it could lead to a big scandal, and a big scandal could thus negatively impact their investment. So, long story short, the SEC has established, or they believe they determined, that shareholders were not, in fact, adequately informed, and the reason for that was that there was just no proper system in place to even track this stuff, to track the employee misconduct, and so as a result, Activision Blizzard, the $60 billion company that generated over $7 billion in revenue last year, needs to pay a $35 million fine. Well, technically, it's not a fine, it's a settlement. Activision Blizzard pays that amount, and then they don't have to deny or admit any of the SEC's findings. They don't have to say, yes, this is true, or say, no, that's not true. Now, the funny thing is the $35 million is actually a significant penalty for this kind of thing. The penalties are typically lower than this, but the SEC has been increasing the fine since, well, if a corporation could just shrug off a fine without breaking a sweat, then it's not really deterring them from any wrongdoing. Now, there technically was a second part to this investigation regarding whistleblower protections. The SEC had basically accused Activision Blizzard of trying to stop former employees from talking to them, to the government, and the SEC pointed to a clause in the employee contract that stated that if you leave the company, you have to first report to them, to Activision Blizzard, any information you want to share with government agencies, which is illegal. You can't impede a former employee from directly communicating with the government. And Activision Blizzard has since removed that clause. This happened in 2022. And they've also made changes to how they collect employee complaints so that they can better track culture issues. In another story, it's bad news for Square Enix. They announced their financial results this week for the first 9 months of the fiscal year, and sales are down 6.6% year over year, with operating income down 17.6% year over year. Now, despite this, profit is actually up year over year, thanks to the money they made by selling off Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, basically their entire Western development wing, to Embracer Group. Still, Square Enix has multiple new titles planned, including new IP. And earlier this year, they also recommitted to their strategy of chasing blockchain and NFT games in 2023. Yay. In some E3 news, according to IGN, it seems Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony will all be skipping E3's glorious return. Or, I guess at this point, not so glorious after all. E3 has long been considered the biggest video game industry trade show, and it's been around since 1995. Originally, just journalists and those working in the industry could attend, but they opened it up to the public in 2017. Then in 2020, it was canceled for the first time due to the pandemic, and in 2021, we had a virtual E3. In 2022, it was canceled altogether, no virtual show either. And then this summer is meant to see the return of a physical E3. But with all three major console publishers backing out, this is basically spelling the death of E3. E3 is the thing that everyone tunes into, or at least they used to get all the major industry news, all the game reveals. If Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft are not going to have a presence anymore, they're going to do their own shows, well, what's even going to be shown at E3 anymore? We know that Xbox is instead having its own summer showcase around the same time as E3, and while we don't have confirmation from Nintendo or Sony, it's safe to bet that they'll have their own presentations, possibly all around the same time. The pandemic really proved to all the major publishers that they don't need E3 anymore. They don't need to share the stage with their competition. They can just host their own streams. It was the smaller publishers that really benefited the most from E3. People would come to see the big games, the big companies, and then they'd get exposed to the little ones as well. For a small dev to share a stage or a show floor with Sony, Nintendo, Microsoft, that makes you feel like you're in the big leagues. But I guess the big three are now starting to feel like they're big fish who have outgrown the pond, even though that pond is the biggest gaming expo in the world. It's also interesting that all three, allegedly, backed out at the same time, at the same E3. It makes me wonder if there was some collusion here. I can imagine one of the three not wanting to back out and leave the other two to get all the attention. There's always been something of a war going on about who won E3, who had the best presentations. So they could have been in a position where they don't want to have a presence at E3, but they feel compelled to in order to not cede ground to the competition. But if they all come to some agreement to withdraw at the same time, well. But what do you folks think? Why did the big three back out of E3? Sound off in the comments. In other news, Capcom has shared new details about the Resident Evil 4 remake, which is slated for launch on March 24th. Most notably, they're doing away with QuickTime events, and I say, good riddance. They're also adding side quests, something that was done in the recent Dead Space remake, and very positively received there. I just love that this new age of remaking games doesn't just take the old game and rebuild it in a new engine for better graphics, and that's it. They're also adding content and changing antiquated or just bad game systems. I won't say QuickTime events are always bad. I'm sure there's some examples of them being used properly, and only a Sith deals in absolutes, but they have a bad rap for a reason. Press X to not die is not exactly the most exhilarating gameplay. Then moving on to wrap up, or hopefully finally wrap up, a developing story we spoke about in a couple past videos. The Dungeons & Dragons drama has come to an end. Maybe. Possibly? We'll see. After unprecedented negative community response to the leak of what plans developer Wizards of the Coast had for the next version of D&D, or specifically for the open gaming license that'll come with it, which is used by third-party publishers to make D&D related content, well, now the devs seem to have completely walked back everything. Wizards of the Coast collected direct feedback via surveys, and after more than 15,000 replies, they said that the feedback was in such high volume and its direction so plain that they are acting on that feedback immediately. First off, they're leaving the original OGL, Open Gaming License, in place as is untouched. Second, they're making the entire System Resource Document 5.1 available under a Creative Commons license. The SRD5 is currently available under the OGL, so moving it to Creative Commons means that the content is going to be freely available for any use, and Wizards of the Coast can't control that license. They don't control Creative Commons. They're giving up all control. In case you don't know, the SRD itself is basically the bare bones rules of D&D that you can currently find available online for free without piracy. It contains most of D&D's rules mechanics, just stripped of lore and flavor text. So you might wonder, why the sudden heel-face turn? Why go from a leaked policy that was seen as very greedy to something even more generous than the existing policy? Could it be the number of people unsubscribing from the paid D&D Beyond service? Could it be the fact that D&D's biggest competitor, Pathfinder, sold out their entire 8-month stock in the last couple of weeks since the fiasco started? Could it be that the execs realized they'd overplayed their hand, digging too greedily and too deep, and were on the brink of demolishing the near monopoly that they built with 5th edition, and going back to the absolute doldrums of 4th edition by handing off all their success to the competition on a silver platter? Could it be that a bunch of good folks on the D&D dev team got to tell a bunch of suits, "See, we told you so"? Well, we'll never know for sure. In other news, Marvel's Wolverine game that's in development by Insomniac Games has been confirmed to be targeting a mature rating. This according to Giant Bomb reporter Jeff Grubb, who says they're going for a hard R rating. They also apparently want to avoid having any links to the Fox movies because they want the game to stand on its own. And while this would normally be a risky move, everyone loves Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and playing to that appeal and nostalgia is an easy win. Insomniac has done really well with the Spider-Man games over the last few years, so there's a lot of promise here. It sounds like the game is likely to be set before Wolverine joins the X-Men, and it may be releasing as early as fall 2024 according to Grubb, but more likely 2025. I think leaning into a mature rating for a Wolverine game is a great idea. We want to feel the visceral power of those claws. In some last Epoch news, last weekend the devs held their multiplayer invitational, the first public multiplayer event, and it seems to have gone quite well. The official release of multiplayer into Last Epoch will come on March 9th, but before then there will be more multiplayer testing events. For instance, this weekend we have a 10,000 participant Pack the Servers event. It may be too late for you to join now, but hey, you can always try. In some Path of Exile news, the devs have released a blog post with their plans for 2023. As we already knew, ExileCon is coming up in July, alongside the reveal of Path of Exile 2's beta date, so it's a big year for the game. The 3.21 expansion will launch in early April, which means the current league will last longer than usual. And this is so that they can neatly line things up with ExileCon, plus give some extra dev time to 3.21. ExileCon will take place on July 29th and 30th, and will showcase Path of Exile 2, Path of Exile Mobile, which we haven't heard about in forever, and the subsequent 3.22 expansion, which is planned to launch around 2 weeks after ExileCon. In Diablo 2 news, community lead Pez Radar has stated on the forums that following the end of the PTR test server for the next season, some pretty significant changes will be coming based on community feedback on the new rune words. We can expect to have final patch notes sometime next week, and Season 3 will begin on February 16th, with Season 2 ending the same day. We covered the new rune words in last week's video if you want to see where we were going into this week's coming patch notes. And in some Diablo 3 news, the PTR test server for Season 28 is ongoing, and it has been a banger. The PTR went up on Tuesday, and for the first time since, well, years, I want to say, the servers got overloaded and massive queues formed. The hype for Season 28 has been unprecedented. I can't remember the last time I've seen people so excited to come back to Diablo 3 outside of a launch like the Necromancer pack or the Reaper of Souls expansion. If you haven't checked it out, I have a video going over the patch notes for everything that hit the test server right here. The Season 28 theme, the Rites of Sanctuary, which introduces a new progression system to work on throughout your season, is feeling really good. You have some choices to make as you progress along that will feel impactful. With the right choices, your 1 to 70 leveling journey will be unlike any season before it. I'll have a video in the future going over strategies and everything. Currently on the PTR, there's certainly some broken stuff right now. It's safe to assume the broken things will be addressed before the patch goes live. For instance, one of the 3 potion powers you unlock via the altar is so incredibly powerful that support builds, ZDPS, zero damage builds, are clearing GR 150s with ease. With that potion power, every time you pop your potion, which can be done once every 30 seconds, you gain a random shrine or pylon effect. So you just spam the potion until you got a conduit and a power pylon, and you are unstoppable. I'm expecting this to get nerfed somehow. The cosmetic reward you get for completing the altar looks awesome. The updated Natalia Demon Hunter build is currently being used with 2 pieces of the Shadow set to absolutely break the game, but that interaction should not be happening, and you can rest assured that it'll be patched before it goes live. We will not be able to work in the 2-piece Shadow Impale bonus into Natalia's. But outside of that, the new Trap Natalia Demon Hunter build is very strong and very simple to play. You basically just strafe around, your traps fly out and explode everywhere, and you just basically spam utility skills while you're doing that. The gameplay style is quite similar to Gears of the Dreadlands. They're both basically spin-to-win builds, and I mean, spin-to-win is fun, but do we really need more than one spin-to-win set? Now, I haven't had a chance to check out the updated Monk Raiment Generator build, but I hear it's strong, though squishy, and this tracks. The build has always had toughness issues, and these issues don't seem to have been addressed. Now, as always, stay tuned for a tier list video on the best builds for Season 28, plus other Season 28 guides. But until then, do let me know what you're most excited about for Season 28 in the comments, what kind of videos, what kind of guides you'd like to see. Because that's going to wrap up this week's video. But do be sure to have checked out last week's video in which we discussed how Blizzard fired a WoW Classic lead for refusing to give a negative rank to his employees. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch, Patreon, and YouTube supporters for making these videos possible. If you like what you see on this channel and want to support the creation of more content, you can consider pledging on YouTube or Patreon, and unlocking behind-the-scenes content, monthly virtual hangouts, and more. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.